In 1955, a surgeon touched a single point on a woman's brain while she was fully awake. Her skull was open, her mind was not asleep, and in that instant, she gasped and said she had lived this exact moment before. The room, the light, the surgeon's voice, all of it, she insisted, had already happened to her once, years ago, somewhere she could not name. It hadn't. Nothing about that room existed before that day. But what you are about to discover is far stranger and far more personal than a strange story from an operating room. Because this same glitch is sitting inside your brain right now, waiting. You know the feeling. You walk into a room, or hear a sentence, or catch a smell, and for half a second your whole body insists you have done this before. Not might have, has. It doesn't fade in slowly. It hits you like a wave, and it's gone almost as fast as it arrived. Scientists call it déjà vu, French for already seen. But the name is the least interesting part. For most of history, nobody could study it, because it strikes without warning and leaves no trace. You cannot summon it on command. You cannot catch it under a microscope while it happens. For decades, it lived in the same drawer as ghosts and premonitions, something people whispered about, but scientists mostly avoided. Then came Wilder Penfield, the surgeon from that operating room. In the 1950s, he was mapping the brains of patients with severe epilepsy, touching different regions with a small electrode while they stayed awake and described what they felt. When he reached a fold of tissue near the temporal lobe, something remarkable kept happening. Patient after patient reported the same eerie thing, a rush of unearned familiarity, a memory that felt complete and vivid, and belonged to no real moment in their life. That single observation cracked the case wide open. Déjà vu wasn't mystical. It was electrical. Here is what your brain is actually doing. Deep inside your temporal lobe sits a structure called the hippocampus. Think of it as your brain's filing clerk. Every new experience gets checked against your memory archive before it's stamped as new or recognized as old. Most of the time, this clerk is fast, quiet, and accurate. You walk into a coffee shop you've never seen, and your brain correctly tags it. Unfamiliar, no match. But sometimes the system misfires. A tiny neural signal meant to say this is new gets crossed with the signal that says this matches something in storage. For a fraction of a second, your brain hands you a memory tag for an experience it never filed. And your conscious mind, trusting its own filing clerk without question, believes it completely. Is your brain lying to you? Not exactly. It's doing something closer to a shrug. It genuinely doesn't know the difference in that instant. What makes this stranger is that you are not the only creature carrying this wiring. Rats and mice have a hippocampus built on the same basic blueprint as yours. Inside it, researchers have found what are called place cells and grid cells, tiny groups of neurons that fire in specific patterns depending on exactly where an animal is standing in space. When a mouse enters a maze it has explored before, a distinct pattern lights up. When it enters somewhere new, a different pattern fires. In lab studies, scientists have been able to trigger the familiar pattern in a completely novel space, essentially forcing a false recognition signal into an animal's brain. The mouse behaves, for a moment, as if it already knows a place it has never been. That means the same basic circuitry that makes you gasp in a doorway and think, "Wait, I've been here," is quietly humming inside the skull of nearly every mammal that has ever lived. You are not having a supernatural moment. You are sharing a very old, very ordinary glitch with your dog, with a mouse in a maze, with almost anything that has ever needed a brain to remember where danger was and where safety was. But that's not even the strangest part of what scientists have found. Some researchers believe déjà vu isn't a malfunction at all. It might be a feature, not a bug. One theory, developed by cognitive scientist Anne Cleary, suggests déjà vu is your brain's version of a memory error check. When a new scene shares enough small details with an old one, layout, lighting, the angle of a doorway, your brain senses the overlap without ever locating the original memory. You feel the echo of a match, even though you can't name the thing being matched. In this view, déjà vu isn't your memory failing. It's your memory succeeding at noticing a pattern and failing only at telling you what the pattern is. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. If déjà vu really is your brain quietly checking its own work, what does it mean that it happens most often when you're tired, stressed, or slightly disoriented? If you've made it this far, you already know you're not the kind of person who scrolls past this stuff. You actually stop and wonder why your own mind does the things it does. This channel exists for people exactly like you, people who look at an animal, or a memory, or a strange flicker in their own head, and want the real answer instead of a shrug. Hit subscribe, and every week you'll find something that makes the world and your own body feel a little more alive. Now here's where the story gets even more personal, because déjà vu has a shadow twin that almost nobody talks about. It's called jamais vu, already seen's opposite, never seen. This is the moment when something deeply familiar, your own street, your own name written on a page, your own face in a mirror, suddenly feels completely alien, as if you're encountering it for the very first time. Where déjà vu falsely stamps something as familiar, jamais vu strips the familiar stamp off something you've known your whole life. Both are proof of the same idea. The line between known and unknown in your brain is not a solid wall. It's a flickering signal that can misfire in either direction. And this is where it gets harder to look away, because déjà vu isn't evenly distributed across your life. It spikes hardest in your teens and 20s, then quietly fades as you age. Roughly 2 out of every 3 people report experiencing it at some point, and it happens far more often in people who travel frequently, dream vividly, or are simply exhausted. Fatigue, it turns out, is one of the clearest triggers scientists have identified. Your overworked hippocampal filing clerk starts making more clerical errors, exactly when you'd expect any tired employee to. There's also a darker cousin worth knowing about, purely so you understand the full picture. In a small number of people with temporal lobe epilepsy, déjà vu isn't a fleeting curiosity. It's a warning signal, a sensation that reliably precedes a seizure by seconds. For these patients, the same misfire that gives you a fleeting shiver in a doorway is instead a neurological siren. It's a stark reminder that the feeling living quietly in your ordinary days is, underneath, a real and measurable electrical event. So what do you do with a feeling that has no object, no origin, and no purpose you can point to? Maybe nothing. Maybe that's the point. Maybe déjà vu isn't a message from a past life, or a crack in the simulation, or proof that time is looping back on itself. Maybe it's simply the sound of an ancient, animal machine, one you share with mice and dogs and every creature that ever needed to remember a path home, quietly checking its own work in the dark. And every so often, it hands you back the wrong receipt. That surgeon's patient, the one on the table in 1955, never found out why that single touch to her brain conjured a memory that didn't exist. Neither, most days, will you. But now, the next time it happens to you, in a doorway, on a street corner, halfway through a stranger's sentence, you'll know it isn't magic. It's memory, misfiring for half a second in the oldest and most animal part of you. If you've ever felt that exact shiver, standing somewhere new but swearing you've stood there before, leave a comment and tell that story. And if this made you see your own mind a little differently, a like helps this reach someone who needs to feel it too.